G'day guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we are looking at the story of Jephthah and his daughter, so let's get right into it. So when you read the story of Jephthah and his daughter, it almost implies that he's offered her up as a burnt sacrifice to the Lord. So why don't we take a look at this passage and have a look at the ways that we could perhaps understand this story. So let me start by reading Judges chapter 11, starting from verse 30. Then Jephthah made a vow to Yahweh and said, "If you will indeed give the sons of Ammon into my hand, then it shall be that whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the sons of Ammon, it shall be Yahweh's, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering." So here we read that Jephthah has made a vow to dedicate that whatever comes out of his home, he will dedicate that up to the Lord as a sacrifice.
Whatever comes out to greet him.
Yeah. And if we keep reading, so Jephthah crossed over to the sons of Ammon to fight against them, and Yahweh gave them into his hand. And he struck them with a very great slaughter from Aroer to the entrance of Minnith, 20 cities, and as far as Abel Keramim, to the sons of Ammon was subdued before the sons of Israel. So here God gives Jephthah victory over the Ammonites. Then Jephthah came to his house at Mizpah, and behold, his daughter was coming out to meet him with the tambourines and with dancing. Now she was his one and only child. Beside her he had no son or daughter. So it happened that when he saw her, he tore his clothes and said, "Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low, and you are among those who trouble me. But I have opened my mouth to Yahweh to vow, and I cannot take it back." So it seems as though Jephthah had to offer his daughter up as a burnt sacrifice to the Lord. And now, we've studied this passage together and we've come up with a couple of different answers.
Yeah, that's right. There's really two main ways to understand this passage. The first way that we could understand it is that Jephthah was not a righteous man, but he was an unrighteous, ungodly man. And there's a couple of things that could indicate that. First of all, when you look at chapter 11, verse 1, it says that he was the son of a harlot. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that he was sinful automatically, but it does give you a bit of an idea about his upbringing. His father had slept with a prostitute and he was the result of that relationship. So it gives you a bit of an idea what his family was like. In addition to that, his other half-brothers drove him out of his area, the area where his father was, and he went to a land called the land of Tob, which archaeologists and scholars say was further away from the tabernacle, so he was further away from the teaching of the law. And it says that a bunch of worthless fellows gathered themselves around him in verse 3 of chapter 11. And it says they went out with him. And what I think that means is they went out raiding with him. So he's a man that's grown up in a very dysfunctional family. His mother was a prostitute. His father was obviously an ungodly man. His brothers were ungodly. They drove him away. And he went out and gathered around himself a group of wicked, sinful men and went out raiding. This is the kind of man that Jephthah was. And then, of course, his family were fighting with the people of Ammon, and they called on Jephthah to help him. And they said, "Look, you can be our ruler if you help us." And so he agreed to that. So he was defending his family and his tribe for selfish reasons, for a selfish motivation, not because he loved God, not because he loved the people of God, but it was for his own selfish, carnal reasons that he fought against the people of Ammon, and God was with him. God used him in that situation. So
Because God gave him victory.
That's right. God gave him victory. That's exactly right. So that's the first way you could understand it. You could understand Jephthah as a man who really didn't understand the law of God. And remember that the period of the Judges was a period where people just did whatever they wanted. They did whatever was right in their own eyes, rather than doing what was right in God's sight. So that's the first way. You could understand him as an unrighteous man who was really ignorant of God's law. Now, some people aren't happy with that. And they'll say, no, he was, familiar with God's law and so forth, even though it doesn't tell us that. But let's assume that he was familiar with God's law. it would be very strange then, and this is the second answer, to think that he was going to make a human sacrifice to God and promising to make a human sacrifice to God if God gave him victory, knowing that that was detestable to God. So another way that you could interpret it is this word burnt offering, really in the Hebrew can just mean to go up. You know, in Ezekiel chapter 40, verse 26, it's used, you know, to go up like stairs, going upstairs. So it could be that Jephthah is saying to Yahweh that whatever comes out of his house to greet him, it will be Yahweh's, and he will offer it up to Yahweh. Not necessarily as a burnt offering, as this translation has put it, as most translations put it, but just offering it up to God. And that seems to make a lot of sense, because it seems as you keep reading that the issue is that this is his only child. He has no other son or daughter. The text emphasizes that in verse 34, which means it would be the end of his lineage. And then it seems as though his daughter goes away weeping about her virginity, not about her death. You know, if you were going to be offered up as a burnt offering, you would go away weeping about the fact that you're about to be offered as a burnt offering, a burnt sacrifice. You're going to be burned to death. But instead, it says that she weeps over her virginity. Why don't you read those verses for us, 37 to 40.
Then she said to her father, "Let this thing be done for me. Let me alone 2 months, that I may go to the mountains and weep because of my virginity, I and my companions." Then he said, "Go." So he sent her away for 2 months, and she went with her companions and wept on the mountains because of her virginity. And it happened at the end of 2 months that she returned to her father, and he did to her according to the vow which he had made. And she did not know a man. Thus it became a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went yearly to commemorate the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite 4 days in the year.
Yeah, so when you read here, you know, that he did accord to her according to the vow which he had made, and she did not know a man. You know, it seems as though he dedicated her to Yahweh, and she became a perpetual virgin unto the Lord. She was offered up as a perpetual virgin unto the Lord. So to me, I think that's probably the most likely explanation. It could be that both of those facts are true. It could be that he was an unrighteous man. He was an ungodly man, and he was influenced by the Canaanites and the pagans around him. And it could be as well that he did not offer her as a burnt offering, but instead he offered her up as a perpetual virgin to the Lord. Yeah. So they're two possible ways to understand the story of Jephthah, and I think either one is correct. And I really don't think he would have offered to sacrifice, make a human sacrifice to God if God would give him victory. That seems to me to be not very plausible, because if he was familiar with the law of God, if he was a godly man, he would have known that that was detestable to Yahweh, and it would make no sense to say, look, I'm going to do something detestable in your eyes if you give me victory. It doesn't seem to make much sense. So I think he just offered her up as a perpetual virgin unto the Lord.
Well, we hope you've liked this video. We'd love to know your thoughts, so please leave your comment below, and we'll see you in our next video.